Hello, and welcome to Andrew Broussard Watercolors. Today, we're going to do a fast and loose watercolor tonalist landscape painting. I already passed some water over this paper, but I'm going to kind of hit it again real quick. This is a quarter sheet of Stonehenge Aqua, 140-pound cold press, 100% cotton. Today's painting, I think, is going to be inspired by kind of just the setting sun from earlier. Not so much the sun itself, but the light shining through the trees. Something that I think is a significant challenge, but I think would be fun to attempt. I saw this while mowing, and I feel like in the past 3 videos I've mentioned yard work, so I apologize for that. I'm going to take some raw sienna and I'm going to come up with an idea as I go along. I'm thinking that leaving just immense areas of the white of the paper might help out. Maybe get a soft, very soft light gradation from the sides. And then painting the trees over it. Maybe mix a little bit of light red oxide just for a little variation in there. Probably doesn't even show up on camera. Let's see. I'm also going to check to see if there's any glare from the lights in a moment. Okay, I think we're doing pretty good. All right. Okay. Put out some fresh ultramarine so I could build up some grays. And I'm just thinking about the stark darks that I'm going to need laid over this. I thought whenever saw the scene, I was thinking about taking a picture, but I opted not to. I think in the future I might do that and play around with it. Hey, Amy. The 2 things that stood out in my mind was the darks, like I said, just the intense darks that would be necessary. But I just don't want to do black over white paper. So I'm going to have to build up my darks. In the last video, we saw that phthalo blue and burnt umber give an amazing dark at the end. Ultramarine and the light red oxide. And the other thing was, well, I guess there was 3 things. The whiteness of it all, the tonal contrast, and then there would be the soft grays around the edges. I think the soft gray around the edges come from an idea described either by, I'm trying to think of my painters. Not sure if it's Carlson's Guide to Landscape Painting or if it was 1909. Well, regardless who it was, we talked about the bending of light around the edges of something, where a thin object would seem less dark against a white background compared to a thick object. That might not make that much sense, so I'll explain it whenever I get to it. I'll grab some Payne's Gray. Just using this to create my scene, create an edge of water right here. I don't have water in my backyard, but I did notice it is quite dry out lately, so we probably do need some rain. fair compositional shape. Number 1 rigger. Now, I'm going to try to use a light wash, and I'm not sure how much will show up, but I really just want super soft grays against this background, kind of to help me map out the scene, and also to talk about what I had mentioned earlier, where thin objects will seem very light and like a light gray, while a thicker object will be a darker gray or a black. Going wet and wet, this will diffuse some, it will soften. I must have not hit that with water at all. Just pushing stuff around. All right, now that I have those in place, I'm going to play around with the foreground a little bit more. Let's go raw sienna and ultramarine. Feeding in a lot of pigment here. I guess the ultimate goal is to just get that blinding white light from just paper. Bring down reflection here. Payne's gray is kind of a cheating tool just to throw in that dark edge. A lot of unmixed ultramarine there and the raw sienna. Maybe we could do some smaller trees that will bring closer and darker. Payne's gray. The classic framing device coming in on the edges. Scraping tool. And I have the card here. I'm using the pointed edge to scrape in and get my dark lines. So you're damaging the paper. The paper's super wet and saturated. There's a lot of pigment floating on top, so it's going to backfill. A rounded edge or a wider scraper will create the wider lines. I'm not really going for that right now. The whiteness of the water. Just using the paper towel to pull, to lift. I think that this will help assist the idea of the thinner lines being a lighter gray. Okay. This will probably be the whitest we can get the paper in some of these spots, which is fine. All right. I'm going to try not to pass over the ones that are exactly there, so we get a sense of depth. A bit more pigment. This will diffuse a little bit more. Pigment and water. Probably add some branches to these fellas too. I don't want to speak too soon, but I'm happy with the composition that's starting to take place. I'm not going to be too picky about these branches. My layering of trees in this fashion, I learned that through Stephen Cronin. He's got a lot of YouTube videos. He's somebody I watched when I had first started with the hake brush. Building up that depth helps. I'm going to grab some burnt umber. Let's grab the phthalo blue. Let's see the darks we can create. Even though we're in the wet and wet stage, you can see how they soften up too. I'm starting to pull pigment up. I have a lot of burnt umber out. I'd put some fresh from the tube. I guess I just grabbed a whole bunch. See a glob on the brush right there. I think last time I talked about student grade pigments, meaning the Cotman and the Van Gogh, the White Knights, the whatever Jerry's Artarama has. Those type of pigments are referred to as student grade, but they really are awesome, and you can get a lot going with them, and it doesn't hold you back. You could buy a tube for $4 versus $15. The $4 tube, once you loosen up and use a whole bunch of it, will definitely help you out. And even if you use large quantities of pigment, like this fashion, you the tube does last a long time. I'm trying to go really light here so that it will soften up, give a smattering of leaves. Just varying the density. Some areas will have a lot, some will have a little. Main goal is to get the wet and wet softness right now. How on earth did I manage to not get that area wet with water? I think David Usher and Alan Owen are really good at just kind of brushing the water on but leaving gaps in that fashion, and it really has a great effect that comes through. Payne's Gray. Even though I know this is going to lighten up some, I think it's helping me map out the darks in the spots. I'm anticipating the lightening taking place, the softening. We can add a little bit of depth and variety. Or dark. Of course, I always mention I paint to the edge just in case it was to be matted. That gives me a little wiggle room. Plus the whites of the edge don't throw me off. So It's almost the end of April. Today was the first time since July of last year that I did some longboarding for over an hour of a trek, some long distance stuff, which I'm very excited about. I took out a more fun board and kind of just went through the motions with like having fun and riding around, and wondering how that's going to affect my painting. Let's get some ultramarine into this mix. Meaning, you know, obviously I need to watch the road and make sure I don't get hurt, but also just looking around, seeing different scenes. Kind of how, you know, looking around while I was mowing made me want to experiment with light. And I think somebody had requested a usage of light. Go some darker. So I'm going to go a little bit thicker and a little bit darker. We could probably cut the foreground later on with some sort of branches. Staying in the wet and wet phase is really fun, but it might be time for a dry off. We'll maybe scrape some highlights in just a little bit. This is the rounded edge. Okay, we are 17 minutes in. I'm going to pause this. We're going to do a dry off. Take note of how things lighten and soften up as it dries. All right, so the paper is pretty dry. You can see how much it softened and lightened up, but the overall feel is there. The tonal values and mapping things out is there. And now we're going to play on top of this for some finer detail. Grabbing the number 4 rigger. This is a really great brush for a lot of pigment and laying down a lot of trees. I'm mixing up some phthalo blue and some burnt umber. This was kind of a go-to dark last time. Now I'm going to try not to pass exactly over my pre-existing lines. This is to give a sense of depth. I'm also pushing a little bit more, trying to get that thicker line out. So brand wise, this is Silver Black Velvet. I don't know if I had mentioned that, but I've been trying to mention alternatives to brushes. And Jerry's Artorama has that buy it, try it. I think they have the Mimic brand, M-I-K-I-C. Well, no, M-I-M-I-K, Mimic. I think I've been spelling it wrong every video. Mix a little bit of ultramarine in. Get this side, our closest trees, just pushing down for that thicker line. That would have been perfect down here for the ripples of water. So had I been planning the scene out prior to painting, just a swipe of the hake brush here with water and not covering the whole thing would have given that effect here. help these guys sit in place. You want to do that so they don't seem like they're just floating there. Now, I'm switching to the number 1, and what I'm going to try to do is get a lighter wash, thinner lines for branches. The idea being, like I said earlier, that thinner will seem lighter in tonal value against the light background, while thicker would be darker. So that's the experiment we're playing with. In theory, I should take a dark line and put it down the middle here, so it'd be light on one side, light on the other, and darker at the densest point. But that might be a little too much for the fast and loose painting style. And it's not a rule or anything like that. It's kind of what I'm just attempting to use to achieve the feel of the scene, of the bright light. Because going with theory, you wouldn't see the whole scene. You'd focus on just a spot, and then everything else would be softer around it. I think I will grab a little bit of Payne's Gray, just feed it in. But I'm gonna kind of just skip along with that. There we go. That might be the fast and loose way, just kind of just passing it over where some's hitting and some isn't. So now leaves, I'm gonna try to get more water. The thing with the hake brush, once you kind of put more water on it, you'll get globs of water. So there we go. So these are closer leaves. I'm going to use that same concept where thin patches or less dense patches will be lighter. If I can get a lighter mix. And then thicker patches, I'll feed in darker. Because the light shining through is going to catch all of the leaves in a small group and reflect off of them. And then the light shining on a thick patch isn't going to pass or reflect on all of them, so then you'll have the dark there. And at the same time, we have to play with just keeping the composition interesting. Let's do burnt umber, phthalo blue for a darker mix, a little bit of Payne's Gray. This will be my thicker patches. I'm going to throw a whole bunch on the side as the framing device, and also because less light would reach that far. Because we'd have the light shining through these trees and then try and hit these. Take this same mix with the number 4 for a thicker tree. Would be beneficial. This guy being thicker, he's going to have darker aspects using that theory that I talked about earlier. And what we could do is we could put this in and then go even super dark in the middle of them. We'll do 3 trees in that fashion. The idea of the ground texture and the roots. Reflections. Now the branches off of these guys, if they're thinner, would follow that theory of being softer. So trying to grab some more water into the mix. Hope y'all are liking this exploration. I don't know if I had mentioned, but you are always welcome to follow along with anything that I do on this channel. And you are more than welcome to sign your own name to it. And you have my express permission to sell anything you do when you follow along one of my tutorials. I want you guys to be successful, have fun, and have money for art supplies. And I have a whole bunch of social media linked below, so I would love to see anything that you do. So feel free to tag me in it, or shoot me a message. Just think about that edge and that composition. There we go. I think at this point we would benefit from a drying off, so I'm going to pause. We'll do a dry off. All right, so we're dry enough. One thing to note, we're 27 minutes in. I've been kind of going for longer time periods lately, so I think I'll allot 13 more minutes at most. The other thing is, I know I had liked my composition earlier, but I think I let this side come in a little too much. So, or come up a little too much. I think if I was to repeat this scene, that's something I want to watch out for. I'm taking a mixture of the phthalo blue and just passing it with the burnt umber in the center of these trunks. Just to go for that effect that I was talking about earlier. See if it helps create that roundness. To emphasize this side, I'm going to create thicker trunks here in the foreground. I'll try to get a variety of wash water in it. To attempt to achieve that effect in one step rather than passing over it. So at this point, we're doing a thick enough line. And we should be able to achieve that variety. And I need to give these trees more character. I noticed that I'm a very big fan of just the tall upright trees. I have so many oak trees around here. I have so many different things that we can pull from. That might be a goal this summer. I think I had talked about it during the winter, where you could see the kind of bone structure of the trees. When drying off, notice the foreground was still light, still considerably light, so I'll just kind of stamp this in. Let's see if we can just go to Payne's Gray. Let's see. Okay. I feel like this kind of slope embankment right back here going down to the water. It's probably a little too light. I don't like painting around trees like that, but looking at it through the camera, I want to darken that up. Okay. I'm thinking compositionally we have the center here, center. I don't know if I want to break in front. I think I will. All right, so it's all about taking risks and experimenting and having fun. So I'm mixing up my 3 that I've been using for the dark, and this tree will be a study in that theory. All right, lights off. Yeah, so we're gonna go lighter as we come off of it. Or try to. That's a little too dark. Lighter mix. That's going to be a challenge to get the lighter branches to pop in front of the background trees. I think this might be a scenario where you could kind of sit there and play around and really start putting a lot of the tiny branches in. Switching to the number 1. It's crazy how this whole painting, well, 33 minutes, 34 minutes, was a setup to experiment with this tree and this theory, essentially. So let me know what you think below. Is it helping it seem more realistic and creating that blinding glow to have it seem backlit? Throw some of the darks over this guy in the foreground. I don't know if it's a word, tedium of just putting in so many tiny branches. What I'll probably wind up doing is doing a dry off and then ending the video and seeing if there's anything off camera, just playing around a little bit more. Let's see. Yeah, so we have the darkest against the light. Let's dry off and see how it looks. And I think I'm going to stop this one here. I will probably do a little bit of branch work off camera, and you'll see the end photo at the end of the video. Maybe even small little leaves, we'll see. But I'm very happy with this experiment. I hope you enjoyed. Please like, subscribe, follow, and let me know down below what you think, what you would like to see, etc. All right, you all take care and have a great day. Bye.